What's up guys, hope you're having a good day. In this video we're going to be taking a deep dive into this weekend's UFC Fight Night card from a betting perspective. Hopefully you'll be able to use the information in this video to make better betting decisions, maybe even earn some extra cash. But before we get into the breakdowns, I want to have a little bit of fun with something, because this week something happened on YouTube which did make me kind of question humanity a little bit. It was a little bit disheartening to see, and I just want to talk about it because I think it's a real shame that this kind of thing happens, and when it does happen, I always want to meet it head on. So basically, when I put out these breakdown videos every week, the vibes are overwhelmingly positive. Everyone in the community comes with such positive vibes, positivity. Of course, I get the odd bit of criticism here and there over picks I've got wrong or breakdowns that, you know, people disagree with me on, and that's all good. But generally speaking, the vibes are good. It's very positive. It's all cool, and I love it. That's why I put these breakdown videos out, right? The positive vibes make me want to keep putting them out, and it's all love. I'd like to think that I give a lot of value to people for free. I put out really in-depth breakdown videos on UFC fights every single week, and these videos can be used as a strategy guide to place your own bets, to use as a strategy guide to live bet these fights, or just as a reference point if you've done your own research on a fight and you maybe want to, you know, confirm things that you've seen. You know, these videos I hope can be a really good way of doing that, and they're totally free, and they take a really long time and a lot of work to put out. And I do it because I like helping people, and I see it as a win-win situation. For people that want to watch some, you know, good quality free content, I hope you get that. And then in return, some people might want to join my community and I can earn money from that, and it's like a win-win. Do you know what I mean? I'm not hurting anyone, doing my best. Spent a lot of time on these videos. I've been doing this for 15 years, got a lot of experience, feel like I know what I'm talking about, and I feel like I've proven myself over a very long period of time as really knowing what I'm talking about when it comes to MMA, which is why over the years I've performed so well live betting on the sport. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, in society, people don't like to see others succeed. And that's just the reality of it. When you're on top or you're doing well, people want to knock you down. And I don't know why this is the case, but it just is. When you look at guys online doing the kind of thing that I do, they post all over social media about their wins and what they're doing and how great they are and all this sort of stuff, and they boom bets and all this shit. Go on my Twitter, go on my Instagram, go on my YouTube channel. I don't talk about any of this shit. You know what I mean? I don't celebrate successes. I don't pump to the world how well I'm doing. Occasionally I will, every once in a while. But it's very rare that I'll go out and be like, boom, crushed it. Boom, we did amazing. Boom, won this bet. Told you so, motherfuckers. Bang, 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 bang. Of course, every once in a while I'm going to reference times we've done well or bets we've won. But I'm definitely not in your face about it. And I very rarely bring it up when you compare me to like other people, right? So earlier this week, I had the audacity to create a video basically highlighting how well I've done betting on football this season. I had the audacity to put out a video basically saying, guys, we are fucking crushing it, and you should probably take a bit of interest in what I'm doing over here because it's a really good opportunity for you, right? I made this video, which we're going to talk about in a moment, titled We Are Crushing It. Now, I very rarely do this type of video because it attracts a certain level of scumbag that just wants to fire shots at you, say a load of bullshit which isn't true, and try and drag you down. That's what you get when you celebrate any kind of success, because there's haters everywhere. So basically, this video was all about the fact that 2 years ago, on my channel, if we go to my channel, 2 years ago, I basically put out a video saying it's getting much harder to make money betting on the UFC in the country I live in, the United Kingdom, because government have given extra powers to betting sites, which means they basically shut your accounts down more aggressively than ever before when you make a bit of profit, right? So I put this video out. Where are we? We'll keep scrolling. We're almost there. Put this video out a year ago, sorry, Actually, it was over a year ago, but YouTube are rounding it up. I put this video out, and I basically outlined my plan to transition away from betting on the UFC into football. And I laid my plan out, said how I was going to do it. And this video was basically me coming back a year later saying, boys, we fucking did it. We fucking did it. Basically, we did it, right? You know, if you look at my profitability chart for football this season, we've made a profit every single month apart from November. And this is the highest liquidity sport in the world. You know, this is not an inefficient betting market like the UFC. Like, there's very few people in the world producing this level of performance on a sport like football. So I put this video out, only 8 minutes long, saying basically our plan that we laid out in the original YouTube video is going well, and I'm very, very far along the line now in achieving my goal of fully transitioning into football. In another 2-3 years, I'll probably be done with UFC, moving into football. And I just thought people would be happy for me, basically. And I said, look, you can buy access to tail my football bets. It's a great opportunity. If you want it, you can do it. If you don't, I don't really care. You don't see me going out there pumping what I do, marketing what I do, you know, really, really hard. So that was basically the video. And then for whatever reason, just these motherfuckers came out of nowhere and started saying a load of crazy shit which wasn't true. Like, the comments on this video were insane. Like, proper insane. Like, crazy people. So I responded to them. But then I was thinking, do you know what? Words can be misinterpreted and misconstrued. So the best thing I can do is go through the comments in a YouTube video like this, and I'll go through every comment one by one, and I will answer it straight up. Like, because these comments are absurd. Like, these people are straight up delusional. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to go through the comments, then we'll get into the breakdowns. I'm sorry to delay this, but I just want to have a little bit of fun with it. So anyway, let's get into it. So there's a few, like, as we're going through the comments on this video, there are like a few threads, right, which just, they get really long. So I'm not going to go through all the comments in the thread. What I'm basically going to do, I'll just go through all the top level comments and I'll answer all these jabronis directly, okay? So this guy is called Salmastite. So you make money from people who pay for your overpriced website. Yes, absolutely. This is business and people deserve to be paid for their time and their work. I've spent 35 years. If you go to the football betting page, I have literally spent 35 years studying the sport of football, developing my skills. I literally barely leave my house. I'm literally chained to my desk, working all the time. I work 12, 14, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. I definitely deserve to be paid really, really well for the work that I do. Your perception of what I do might be that it's very easy, but it fucking isn't. So yeah, I get paid very well, and I deserve to be paid very well for all my years of experience and the amount of sacrifices I have to make in my personal life to perform at the level that I consistently perform at, which is basically making a profit almost every fucking month on the highest liquidity sport in the world. And if you don't appreciate how big of an achievement that is, you are not going to make it, my friend. Next, AMKC1VV. Scammer with zero proof of his success, wants people to blindly trust him. So these kind of guys are hilarious, because what they basically do is they watch a YouTube video and then they'll just leave a comment with like a really opinionated, strong statement with no context at all. So in this guy's view, there is no proof of my success. When, if you just like look into who I am and what I've done in my background just a little bit, you'll see there's actually a lot of proof out there, right? Let's start with my Discord community. So my website has been around. I mean, I'm not going to go on Wayback Machine because it's quite slow and it will make this video extra long. But basically, my website's been around since around, I think, 2013, maybe 2015. But either way, the website's been around for at least 8 years. Over that time, I've built a really big community. So on my website, we used to have a chat room and a forum, but obviously, you know, things move on, technology moves on. Now we moved over to Discord. So as you can see, I have a very active Discord community. We can go to general chat. There's a bunch of people talking about politics and shit in here. We can go to the MMA chat. Bunch of people talking about PFL tonight and upcoming fights. Lots of fights in there. bunch of different people talking about stuff in there. We can go to the VIP chat room, again, bunch of different people talking about stuff in there. We can go to, oh, let's go to the football room, right? Bunch of people talking about stuff in here. I was talking about a car I've just bought. A bunch of people, we're talking about football and things in there. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, whatever. You can see here, we've got, you know, 99 people offline. If we just go here, right? There we go. 19 people online, 15 people online, 4 people online, 269 people in the community, right? On top of that, on my website, I've got a long history of producing content. I've got a long history of posting my results on my website. So when you say there's zero proof of his success, how do you think I have this community with these people that have been with me for years if there's no proof of my success? Do you think I've basically scammed all these people and they've just stuck with me for years and years and years and years and years, and like not like they haven't realized they're being scammed? Or do you think that like these are all bots? Do you think everyone in here is a bot? Do you think Google that literally just posted while my hands were on the keyboard was a bot? Do you think that was orchestrated? Do you think he's a fake person? Do you think all these people are fake? Like, what do you mean no proof, my guy? Like, literally, do you think this is all made up? Do you literally think that, let me just bring the football betting group up for this week. We've had 2 winners already this week on an Italian game and an Australian game. And you see all these emojis from the people that are happy that we've won bets, and then you've got the subscribers there. You think this is all fake, right? There's no proof of any of this. I've made it all up. Like, how stupid are you, my guy? Like, literally, like, do some fucking research. What else have we got? Bob, nice one for the positive vibes, Bob, mate. Really appreciate it. Okay, this is a great one. And CCH4717. So I'm not gonna totally go in on this guy because he might not be aware of this. If he's new to my community, a lot of people don't bet. Most people don't make money betting on sports, right? So most people are not aware of this. So I'm not gonna go in big time on and CCH. But basically, people, the age-old argument, right, is people will say, why do you charge money for your betting tips? If you're profitable betting on sports, you shouldn't have to sell access to betting tips and make money that way, right? On the surface, that's a very, very valid argument. But when you understand how the betting industry is, that is not a valid argument. If you go to my channel, if we go back to the top here, right, you will see multiple videos where I've basically posted betting accounts that I've had which have been shut down for making a profit. There's one here where I made $15,000 and the account got closed. There's another one here, another one here, another one here. I'll drop another one next week. Basically, the betting industry is a very, very dirty industry where if you open a betting account, you make a few $1,000s profit, and then the betting sites will shut you down. They'll close your account. You can never open another account on that betting website. And so you're kind of screwed, right? You're back to square one. The problem with the betting industry is there's no security in it for guys like me. So my speciality is live betting on the UFC. If I deposit money into a betting account, as soon as I've made a few $1,000s profit, the betting site will shut me down and I'll have to try and find another account elsewhere. And when you've been doing this as long as I have, 15 fucking years, you've had hundreds of betting accounts closed down. It gets to the point where it becomes really, 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 really difficult to keep getting access to betting accounts to earn good money betting on sports. And you have no security, right? Because if you can't place bets, how are you supposed to make money? So a good way you can get security is by selling access to your bets, because then you can make profit from your bets in another way when you can't actually open accounts to place bets yourself. So I understand this is logical. Like, people would be like, oh, why have you got to do this if you don't fucking if you make money betting, why do you need to do it? It's because of security. And on top of that, betting is very difficult, right? If you have long losing streaks, it can mess with you mentally. It can it can make you doubt yourself. It can knock your confidence. You imagine what it feels like, right? Going on a 6-month losing streak is perfectly normal. It's part of gambling. But imagine how psychologically difficult it would be if you had zero money coming in for 6 months. By selling access to my betting tips, it alleviates some of the pressure I'm under, so that when I'm in really, really bad runs, I've got money coming in, which means I can stay you know, relatively calm, relatively relaxed, trust in the process, know that things are going to turn around, and over, you know, however long, start to go back to normal, start to earn money again. Just having that security in place of having that constant income stream just makes it way easier for me to perform optimally. Because betting on sports is a mental game. It's all mental, and it gets dark when you're on these long losing streaks, which happen. It gets very dark. They're very difficult to manage mentally. So having that little bit of security just makes it a lot easier not to completely freak out and fully go off the rails. So there's lots of reasons why. And again, you know, people talking about MMA videos, 1 hour long, 0 bets. The thing is, dude, you have no idea what bets I'm placing on a week-to-week basis, right? If I'm not explicitly saying this is what I'm betting in a YouTube video, because perhaps I'm betting on a prelim fight or something that I haven't covered in the video, like, how do you know how I'm doing on MMA? Like, you literally have no idea. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, you know, you say I have 0 bets, mate. Like, put it this way, I place bets on every UFC event, and I'm something like 20-2 on my last, you know, 22 over/under bets. Like, my win rate is excellent. You know what I mean? It's fucking excellent. If you're in my community, you would know that. But most people like this, they just bump their gums, leave random comments. And not in my community, they just make assumptions. Anyway, on to Jesse Diesel. I've followed you for weeks. This is the biggest problem straight away. This guy, Jesse Diesel, he's basically judging my character, judging my performance on a matter of weeks. I've literally been doing this for 15 years. I've had my website for almost 10 years. You are the biggest casual fraud wannabe on here. I'm going to make a YouTube channel just to put you out of business and take your viewers. You're a poser, yapping for hours and still lose. Wow. Well, I don't even know where to begin with this guy. All I can say is, mate, if you think you can do better than me, I'm very, very much looking forward to seeing how you do, because this ain't fucking easy, dude. I've been doing this a long time. It's hard work. I've got permanent bags under my eyes, and it takes years off your life. So if you think this is easy, go for it, dude. Let's see how you do. Only a very, 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 very small percentage of people that bet on sports are profitable. So when you do encounter someone profitable on sports like myself, you should probably shut the fuck up and just listen to what I'm saying, because you might actually learn something. So, you know, you do you, dude. If you think you can do better, good luck. But I can promise you it will not be easy. What's up, Insane Game Vids? Tim, how you doing, dude? Mark the Maris, hope you're doing good, mate. Vins is basically saying hundreds of betting accounts being closed has to be a big exaggeration. I wish it was, dude, but it isn't. Unfortunately, those are the lengths you've got to go to in order to consistently make money in this game. So, you know, earlier on I was saying there's no security because of how aggressive betting sites are with account closures. That's just the way it is. Basically, in Europe at the moment, I've got a list of 80 to 100 betting sites that I can open up accounts on, and unfortunately the majority of them are very, very aggressive with account closures and shut you down very, very quickly. So if you think about it, if I've been doing this for 15 years and I run 8 to 10 accounts simultaneously, you know, if you think about it, if betting sites will close down profitable players literally within 2 or 3 weeks, you can rack up big numbers of accounts being closed very, very, very quickly. And so it's just one of those things, man. It's a bit of a nightmare. Like, if you look at this video as an example, ManBetX, if you watch this video, ManBetX actually closed me down after I just earned like $500 profit. So if you think about it and extrapolate that over 15 years, that's a lot of accounts, man. And then we've got FIFA X Gaming. Why don't you track your bets on third-party tracking sites for transparency? This is a really, really good question. So, it's a good question, but unfortunately, what people don't realize is when you put all of your bets online for anyone to access, it does leave you in quite a vulnerable position for a few reasons. The first reason being, I've already spoken in depth about how difficult it is for me to get accounts and keep accounts open, and how aggressive betting sites are in my country at shutting down profitable players. If my bets were third-party tracked and I put all my bets online, say I put all my football bets online, all my UFC bets online, it would be really, really easy for betting sites to go and look at the bets that I've been placing and then identify betting accounts that I currently have and my members have, and close our accounts down. Making money betting on sports is easy, right? You can place winning bets easily. What I do is not difficult. Actually having accounts open for long enough to be able to make money from placing the bets is the difficult part. So I go to extreme lengths. I do whatever I can to keep my accounts open as long as humanly possible. I don't want to be putting all my bets on a third-party tracked site so that these betting sites can go on there, see what bets I've been placing, cross-referencing accounts that have placed exactly the same bets, and then shutting me down even faster and more aggressively than they already do. I also don't want people, studying the type of bets I place and reverse engineering my strategies. I just don't want it. At the end of the day, the way I look at it is, this is very, very simple. If you want me to be third-party tracked for transparency, I'm telling you right now, I'm never going to do it. And if that means you don't trust me, and you think I'm a scammer, and you think I'm a fraud, and you think everything that I do is made up, you think all this is false, that's cool. We don't have to do business. We don't have to interact. You don't have to trust me. I'm cool with that. But I'm not going to sacrifice the way I do things, which I believe are best personally for me, to please other people. Because at the end of the day, if my betting accounts start to get closed down faster, or my betting strategies that are profitable get reverse engineered and they're not profitable anymore, the people that demanded I went on third-party tracking ain't going to give a fuck about me. They're not going to give a fuck about me when I can't earn as much. So I'm going to do what's right for me. And like I say, I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone. In 2-3 years, I'm going to be out of the game, probably retired anyway with that current level of performance on football. But the whole third-party track thing, I do get why it's important. There's a lot of scammers out there. There are a lot of jokers and fraudsters and jabronis and people that are evil and nefarious. But I feel, for fuck's sake, man, do I not talk in fights in enough depth for you to kind of see that there is probably more going on here than some dude scamming you? Like, have I not been here doing this long enough, talking long enough, like on the front lines for long enough, turning up every week for long enough? Do you know what I mean? Like, growing my community the size it is. It's just like, but what? Like, literally, do you honestly think I am fucking like lying about this? Am I literally just fucking putting random numbers in and like just fucking pretending that I'm profitable on football or profitable on UFC? Like, literally, do you understand how absurd this is? I just don't get it, bro. And I know there's a lot of fucking, I know there are a lot of scammers out there and a lot of dodgy people, but these people aren't around for 15 years talking in ultra levels of depth about sport, turning up every single week, pumping out hours and hours and hours of content. Like, bro, if I am a scammer, I'm the fucking hardest working fucking scammer ever. Do you know what I'm saying, bro? Like, I don't know what more people need to see from me to understand that I'm literally as real as it gets. So yeah, I put this video out. I'm like, boys, we're literally like well on track for achieving our goals. Put a video out a year ago outlining a plan as to what I was going to achieve on football. I've not far off fucking achieving the plan, to be honest with you. I thought everyone would be happy for me, and instead they're like, oh, you're a scammer, you've got no proof you've done this, what about third-party tracking? It's like, why'd I even bother making these fucking videos? You know what I'm saying? But anyway, the majority of vibes on YouTube are real positive, so I'm not going to let the jabronis get me down. What I am going to do is keep turning up every week, busting out these videos, and hopefully for everyone that does have a brain, they will appreciate that I do put a lot of work into this. I do care about people that watch my videos. I'm not trying to scam anyone. I'm actually doing everything with good intention, which is why I go into so much depth on these fights, because I actually hate betting sites so much that this is one of the ways that I get back at them. Because over the years, you don't understand how frustrating it is to have these skills that I can't use to my full potential, because as soon as I make a few $1,000s profit, the ban hammer comes and I get shut down. One of the reasons why I share all my work, all my breakdown videos, is so that other people can use it to basically punch the bookies in the dick. And that's the reason why I'm trying to transition into football, because I'm just so fucking burnt out and done with the bullshit of literally having betting accounts closed left, right and centre on UFC, and then even when I put out free content, people think I'm a scammer. I'm literally sat here like, what's the fucking point? Anyway, just speaking from the heart, little bit of a rant. I never really talk like this, but I was a bit pissed off this week because, like I say, it's all positive vibes when I put out hours and hours of free breakdowns every week. And the second I have the audacity to post a video showing how well I've done, everyone's like, oh, you're a scammer. It's like, fuck you. Literally, fuck you. Fuck you. If you can't see, I am as legit as it can possibly get in this space. I've no fucking... I just can't help you, man. I can't help you. You live on a different planet to me. Anyway, let us now get into breaking down the first fight on this card, which is going to be Brendan Allen versus Chris Curtis. And this card, it's another one of those cards that we've had a lot of in recent weeks that's absolutely fantastic for betting. Amazing for live betting. Really confident we'll make a profit on this weekend's card. Again, we've been doing really well lately. We've made a profit on 5 of the last 6 events. And I'm confident we'll do well on this one as well. And I really, really hope that you're going to be able to, use the information in these breakdowns to do well this weekend as well. So let's get into it. Let's get the implied probability calculator out. And we can see that Brendan Allen is the favourite at average odds of around 1.47, which is going to be minus 213 for an implied probability of 68%. If we take a look at the odds on Chris Curtis, we can see that he is around an average of 2.70, which is plus 170 for an implied probability of 37%. So Curtis, 36 years old, 5'10" with a 75.5-inch reach. Allen, 28 years old, 6'2" with a 75.5-inch reach. So there's not the only real X factor to focus on this fight is the fact that Curtis does fit the profile of someone that should be on quite a steep decline at this stage in his career, because he's got over 40 pro fights, which is a lot of fights. That's a lot of miles on the clock, a lot of wear and tear. And we know Curtis is a guy that likes to stand in the pocket, mix it up with his opponents. And he's also been in a lot of wars. The guy's gone the distance a lot. He is a bit of a decisionator, which means he's spent a lot of time in the cage, which inevitably means more damage, more injuries, more wear and tear on the body. On top of that, he's going to be 37 years old soon, which is really, really old for a middleweight. And so even though I wouldn't necessarily say we've seen signs that Curtis is declining, he fits the profile of someone that certainly will pretty soon. Whereas Brendan Allen, 28 years old, trains at a good gym. He is improving. Whereas we haven't really seen signs that Curtis is declining, we absolutely know that Brendan Allen is improving from fight to fight. And so I do feel both these guys are very much on opposite career trajectories at the moment. But when we consider how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, it is a really interesting stylistic matchup, because the major problem with Chris Curtis is that he's very, very one-dimensional. We know that he doesn't really throw kicks. He's not going to try and take you down. And his fighting style completely revolves around him trying to stand in front of you and outbox you. And because of this, there are no real surprises with him. When you face Chris Curtis, you know exactly what to expect. And that's why we see him really struggle against guys like Jack Hermanson, who come in with a specific game plan and strategy that's tailored towards causing him problems and exploiting his specific style of fighting. And so whenever you've got a guy like Chris Curtis, it's a little bit dangerous to bet on them, because he doesn't have the element of surprise on his side. If Brendan Allen prepares well for the fight this weekend, he's going to know exactly what to expect, and he'll have a game plan and strategy that is tailored towards beating Curtis. However, I would say Allen's not the kind of guy that is particularly strategic. He doesn't have the best fight IQ, and as a result, I can't trust Allen to fight in a safe and smart way, in a really strategic way, as much as other people that we've seen Curtis face in the past. So while this should be a very, very easy stylistic matchup for Allen, because he knows exactly what to expect, it wouldn't surprise me if Allen still tried to engage Curtis in the areas of the fight where Curtis can make this competitive. And that's certainly something to think about. Allen's not the kind of guy that I would trust. So stylistically, it's a really interesting matchup, because when we look at Brendan Allen, he's a way more well-rounded fighter than Chris Curtis. You know, his boxing isn't as good as Curtis, but his kicking game is very good. We saw him do huge damage to Punahel Soriano with his kicking game. It was a while ago now, but it was the best kind of showcase as to how devastating Allen's kicking game is. And, you know, we also know that he's got a decent level of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's a reasonably good MMA grappler. He's a bit weak off his back, but Curtis never tries to take guys down, so I don't think that's going to matter in this fight. So when you look at how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, you've got a situation where Allen has way more ways to win. He is a much more well-rounded mixed martial artist, and he's got a lot of technical advantages over Curtis in his kicking game and his grappling. But my concern for Allen in this fight is that he may make the mistake of being, you know, like a moth to the bug zapper and engaging Curtis in the area of the fight where Curtis could potentially cause him problems. And that would be in the striking, in the boxing. And the reason why I feel that way is because even though Allen's a way more well-rounded fighter than Curtis, the one thing Curtis does well, which is box, he's pretty good at. And I would say he's a better boxer than Allen. And when we consider how this fight could go, we know that Chris Curtis's takedown offense is very, very good. And we know that Brendan Allen's not the best offensive wrestler. So even though Allen's a better grappler than Curtis, it's unlikely that grappling is really going to influence the outcome of this fight very much. So then we've got to think about how these two match up when it comes to striking. And so we can see that Allen, you know, has got a slight size advantage over Curtis, nothing major. But Allen will be fighting longer than Curtis, right? Allen, you know, he's got that nice long kicking game. He uses kicks well to measure distance. And Curtis is in that tight boxing stance, wants to fight you in a phone booth, traditional boxing style. So he's got a way more compact style of fighting. So when you look at how they match up when it comes to striking, it's interesting because Curtis is a much better boxer than Allen. And so we have to question whether Allen's kicking game is going to be enough to give him the edge in striking range, right? And really have an influence on this fight, you know, in terms of being enough for Allen to outstrike Curtis. And I'm not sure that it is because of how much better of a boxer Curtis is. I really feel that this fight is going to come down to whether or not Allen chooses to fight smart or whether he lets his ego get the better of him and looks to engage Curtis in boxing range, where I think Curtis is the better fighter. If Allen uses the same game plan and strategy that Hermansson did and uses his footwork and movement and range-finding kicks to bounce around on the outside and chip away at Curtis, I think he'll outstrike him by a wide margin and win very comfortably. Because the one thing about Curtis is his boxing is only effective when you stood right in front of him in a phone booth. As soon as you start to move around, he really struggles to land on moving targets, and we've seen that in a few of his past fights. The weakness even cropped up against Kelvin Gastelum and Jacqueline Buckley as well. If you go back and watch the first round against Buckley, Curtis was really struggling to land anything before then knocking Buckley out in round 2. But the point being, if you use a lot of footwork and movement and chip away at Curtis and you don't engage him in boxing range, he struggles really bad. My concern for Allen is that he's not disciplined enough to stick to that game plan because his fight IQ isn't the best, and he has been known to get sucked into brawls. And if he gets sucked into a brawl against Curtis and starts trying to mix it up with him in boxing range, Curtis is the better boxer. So when we look at this fight from a betting point of view, there's no doubt that Allen should be the favourite, and there's so many reasons why. We've already said he's the better grappler, even though that probably won't matter. He's slightly bigger than Curtis. He's got better footwork, better movement. He's a more dynamic striker that throws a wider range of strikes. And on top of that, we also know that Chris Curtis is a lot older than Allen. In fact, he's 8 years older, and we know that the younger fighter wins around 67% of the time when there's an 8-year age gap in a fight. So Allen's got a lot of advantages on his side here. His odds reflect that with an implied probability of about 66%. But I do think Allen wins this weekend just because, for me, Curtis is very, 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 very one-dimensional. And the only way I see Allen losing this is if he were to pull an Erin Blanchfield style mistake and just probably fight a little bit dumb and not really fight to his full strengths, like Blanchfield, of course, last week, not really trying that hard to take Fiorot down. I think if Allen tries to win a boxing match against Curtis, he'll lose. Outside of that, he probably chips away at Curtis from a safe distance on the outside and wins very comfortably, I would imagine. So in terms of the over-under on this fight, obviously both these guys are tough as nails. They've got granite chins. They've both got big hearts. They're the kind of fighters you have to practically kill in order to put away. They also frequently fight the decisions. You can see that four of Curtis's last 6 have gone to a decision. And when we look at Allen's record, even though a lot of his fights have ended inside the distance, the guys that he has been finishing inside the distance obviously haven't been anywhere near as tough or durable as Curtis. If you look at the bigger picture, when Allen does go up against tougher guys, Malkoun, Soriano, Dorcas, he frequently fights the decisions. The guys he's been finishing are relatively low level or guys with bad cardio like Andre Munoz. So yeah, very, very likely this fight goes deep in my opinion, and I am actually very, very tempted to bet the over 2.5 rounds. I'm not sure if I'm going to pull the trigger on that yet. I'll let you know in my Discord community if I do. I'll research this fight a second time and see how I feel about it. But from my perspective, both guys are so durable and tough, and neither of them are particularly dangerous, that I think it's pretty unlikely either of these would get knocked out. Like if we look at Curtis's record, he's had 10 losses, but out of those 10 losses, he's only ever been KO'd 1 time, and that was against Ray Cooper all the way back in 2019. If we look at Brendan Allen, we can see that he's lost 5 times, was KO'd against Chris Curtis back in 2021, and then outside of that has never been KO'd. So Curtis was the only guy to ever KO him. However, it was early in Allen's career. Allen's improved a lot since then. His footwork, his movement is a lot better. He's got a granite chin. He's a lot better defensively than he used to be. And so, I think it's pretty likely this fight goes deep. I'd be surprised if it ended quickly. And to be fair, when you look at the fact that their first fight ended deep into round 2, the likelihood is that, this fight would perhaps, it would perhaps go deeper because, with it being a 5-rounder, these guys are likely to start a bit slower, pace themselves a bit better, not be so aggressive early on as you would in a 3-round fight, which again I think increases the probability of over 2.5 rounds bet hitting. I think when you look at a 3-round fight, over 2.5 rounds is a lot more risky because you'll get guys have that urgency in the second half of the fight to get the finish if it's close. Whereas in a 5-round fight, you don't get that with over 2.5 rounds so much because people are still in that starting slow phase because they know they've got to pace themselves over 5 rounds instead of 3. So the over 2.5 round bets are always interesting to me in 5-rounders, and I think this one's quite likely to hit. I'm surprised that the odds are that generous, if I'm honest, so I'll probably go for this. In terms of the prop bets on this one, we can see that what can we go for? So I would go for, the only prop I would consider would be Allen by decision. The odds aren't great, to be honest, but I know some people like props. I won't be betting that myself, but if you do like props, I would recommend that wins is probably the most likely to hit, but it's not something that I'll be betting myself. I don't think the odds are great. I don't really like props. They're not really worth it for me personally, so I hope you found that useful. Now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be Damon Jackson against Alexander Hernandez. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Hernandez is the favourite at average odds of around 1.49, which is minus 204 for an implied probability of 67%. If we take a look at the odds on Jackson, he's around an average of 2.65, which is going to be plus 165 for an implied probability of 38%. So Jackson is 35 years old, 5'11", with a 71-inch reach. Hernandez, 31 years old, 5'9", with a 72-inch reach. So both guys roughly about the same size. We can see Jackson is a bit older. To be fair, 35 is quite old for the division. Obviously, featherweight division's one of the lighter weight classes. The lighter weight classes are all about speed, reflexes and athleticism. So Jackson is entering that stage in his career where he should be starting to decline. And time will tell. Obviously, this weekend will be a good indication of how close Jackson is to Father Time claiming his career from him. But in terms of how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, it is a very, very interesting one. Because Alexander Hernandez actually has a base in wrestling, and we know Damon Jackson is a pure MMA grappler. But what's interesting about Hernandez is that he's one of these guys that has pretty good cardio when he's allowed to control the control the pace of the fight. So when he's able to use his wrestling in reverse to keep fights standing, when he can stand and just chip away at his opponents with his striking, his cardio is pretty good over 3 rounds. Hernandez's cardio only starts to fail him and get him into trouble if you make him grapple. And he's one of these guys that has a base in wrestling, but if he just grapples for a little bit, he will gas very bad and get very, very tired. So this is a real interesting stylistic matchup, because Jackson's one of these guys that, generally speaking, has pretty good cardio. That's why he's got the nickname the Leech. He's one of those guys that can stick to you like glue and just basically, grapple relentlessly for 15 minutes without slowing down that much. There have been certain fights in his career where he has slowed a decent amount, but generally speaking, Jackson can go pretty hard for 3 rounds, and I would certainly trust Jackson's cardio more than I would trust Hernandez's in a fight where Jackson's able to make Hernandez work really, really hard. So how this fight is likely to look is Hernandez is going to have a pretty big advantage on the feet. He moves well, he's a technical striker, he hits very hard, he's got great footwork. Jackson is quite stiff, quite slow, not the best defensively, just a little bit awkward on the feet. And so Jackson is going to find it difficult to get his grappling game going, because every time he comes forward, tries to grab a hold of Hernandez and drag him to the ground, Hernandez has got that great footwork, that athleticism, that movement, and also his defensive wrestling to make it very difficult for Jackson to grab a hold of him and tie him up. So Jackson's going to have a real tough time getting a hold of Hernandez for long enough to stand a chance of dragging him to the ground without taking big damage. But the thing about this fight is that Jackson doesn't need to necessarily get Hernandez down in the first half of this fight in order to win. All he needs to do is hang in there and force Hernandez to work. Because remember what I said a few moments ago, Hernandez is one of these guys that if you make him grapple a bit, he will gas very quick. So even if Jackson's not having much success with his grappling, so long as he can force Hernandez to grapple, whether he has success or not doesn't matter, he's going to be putting money in the bank for later in the fight when Hernandez will start to slow. So this is one of those fights which is super interesting, because we know Hernandez early on is likely to do very well when he's fresh. Jackson's going to have to take big damage to get inside and grab a hold of Hernandez and make him work. But the longer the fight goes, especially if Jackson can make Hernandez work hard early, the better it gets for Jackson. And that's really how these two match up from a stylistic point of view. Skill for skill, from a technical point of view, Hernandez is probably better than Jackson everywhere. But Hernandez doesn't like to grapple hard, and that's what Jackson is going to be trying to force him to do, which makes this a very, very interesting clash of styles. Now, in terms of my lean on this fight, it is a difficult one, because Hernandez has got true legit knockout power. Damon Jackson is obviously very bad defensively. Fight starts standing, and Hernandez at this stage in his career is very aware of his limitations. Earlier in his career, if you go back 3 or 4 years, Hernandez wouldn't shy away from engaging with his opponent everywhere. So he would grapple with them. He would meet you head on and engage anywhere in the fight that you wanted to engage, be it standing up or on the ground. But after suffering some losses where his gas tank has held him down or held him back, now when we've seen him face guys like Francisco Trinaldo or Jim Miller, or even, to be fair, his last fight against Bill Algeo, you see him make a conscious decision to hold back in an effort to pace himself. And I think if he does that against Jackson, it's going to be really difficult for Jackson, because every time Jackson comes forward and tries to grab a hold of Hernandez, Hernandez can use that footwork, that movement, that counter-striking to just pick Jackson off, circle away, and make it really, really difficult for Jackson to get a hold of him. Because the thing about Jackson is he's not a particularly good offensive wrestler, which again is where the Leech nickname comes from. He's quite stiff, he's quite slow, so when he comes forward trying to look for takedowns, the takedowns tend to come above hip height, in the clinch, off body locks, trips and throws. And in order to get to those positions, you need to be able to grab a hold of your opponent and tie them up, which isn't an easy thing to do to someone like Hernandez, who moves as well and is as strong and athletic. So that's how this fight kind of plays out. If you want to bet this fight, for me, I would personally prefer to have money on Jackson, just because I think at underdog odds he gives you the better risk to reward ratio. I wouldn't feel confident or comfortable betting on a big favourite like Hernandez, knowing that his gas tank doesn't usually hold up that well against grapplers. But at the same time, we've got to be realistic and accept that Jackson's quite old for the division. He's stiff, he's slow, he's bad defensively. He's not going to find it easy to get a hold of Hernandez. So it's a fight for me. It's difficult to feel confident either way. Hernandez deserves to be the favourite because, like I say, he's got a lot better at pacing himself. He's a lot younger. Stylistically, it's not going to be easy for Jackson to get hold of him and make him grapple. And even if he does, Hernandez might have won 2 rounds by the time he starts to slow down, right? If we think about the arc of how Hernandez's fights usually play out, like if you go watch his fight against Jim Miller where he was struggling bad in round 3, what usually happens in Hernandez's fights is that he wins the first round, struggles in the 3rd round, and his fights all really come down to that 2nd round, where it really depends on if his opponents have tired him out enough early to the extent that they can nick round 2 from him. And don't get me wrong, that's not how it always goes. Sometimes he just runs into guys like Bill Algeo who put it on him from the 1st round, and they're just better fighters. But when Hernandez does have the advantage over people, in matchups, for example, against Jim Miller, usually he does well early, fades hard late on, and that round 2 is the swing round. And if he doesn't knock Jackson out early here, I think this fight will be exactly the same. I think Jackson will probably do pretty well in round 3. Hernandez will give him hell in round 1. Round 2 is going to be that swing round. So watch out for that if you're watching this fight this weekend. So in terms of the over-under on this one, I wouldn't personally touch the over-under myself, just because Jackson is so bad defensively that I could see Hernandez knocking him out early. So for that reason, I wouldn't be interested in the over. But on the flip side, I wouldn't be interested in the under either, because if Hernandez does obviously make a really conscious effort to pace himself, I think he could fight very safely, very cautiously, just circle away from Jackson, pick him off from the outside, chip away at him, counter-strike him with leg kicks and jabs, and not really put himself in that much danger and not really go for the kill either, in which case the fight would probably go pretty deep. So I don't have a strong opinion on the over-under on this one. I could see both scenarios playing out, a reasonably good percentage of the time. I think that is better off passing on that. In terms of the props on this one, if I was going to bet a prop, which I'm not going to, but if you were to ask me what is the most likely prop to hit on this, I would go for Hernandez by decision. I think that's the most likely one. If you're looking to gamble a little bit and potentially make some big gains and speculate a little bit and gamble a little bit for some money, just to have a bit of fun, Jackson to win in round 3 is interesting to me at odds of 15.0 plus 1,400, just because we know Hernandez fades as fights wear on, and we have seen Jackson in fights like against Mirsad Bektik, where he's been down 2 rounds and he's gone really hard for the finish late on. We saw Hernandez in a pretty bad position against Jim Miller in the 3rd round when he faded. I think Jackson's more than capable of putting him in a similar position, and who knows, maybe going one step further and getting a finish this time. So, Jackson to win in round 3 is not super likely to hit, but when you're betting things in this odds range, you don't need to hit with a particularly high win rate for bets like that to be profitable over the long term. So I'd consider Jackson in round 3, but the most likely outcome on this fight, in my opinion, is Hernandez the win by decision. So I hope you found that useful. Now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be Morgan Charriere against Cheppy Mariscal. So I probably completely butchered the pronunciation of those names, but please forgive me because this is an incredible fight. I think both these are very, very solid fighters, and it's a really good stylistic matchup. The UFC have done a great job with the matchmaking on this one. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds, we can see that both guys are in the even money odds range. Charriere is the slight favourite at average odds of around 1.85, which is minus 118 for an implied probability of 54%. And Mariscal is the underdog at average odds of 1.95, which is minus 105 for an implied probability of 51%. So Charriere is 28 years old, 5'8", with a 69-inch reach. Mariscal, 31 years old, 5'7", with a 69-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same size. Nothing too major there. So this is a real interesting stylistic matchup, because when you look at both these guys from a technical point of view, it does become pretty clear pretty quickly that Charriere is significantly better than Mariscal everywhere from a technical point of view. He does appear to be both the better striker and the better grappler, but as we know, skills aren't everything in determining the most likely outcome of a fight. There's a lot of other things to consider, and in some areas there are some pretty big red flags with Charriere that are not present with Mariscal. So let's get into them. So when we look at Charriere's record, there is a pretty big red flag with it, which kind of summarizes the style of fighter that he is. So when you look at his record, you guys know me, I don't pay that much attention to MMA records. They're mostly irrelevant to me. I focus more on the skills displayed in the octagon. But when you look at the MMA records of fighters, sometimes it can give you some strong clues, some strong indicators as to the style of fighter that we're dealing with. And if you look at Charriere's record, you'll see an insane amount of his fights have gone to either a split or majority decision. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That is a lot of fights that have ended, very, very close in a way that the judges couldn't really determine who was the winner, right? Because otherwise we would have seen more unanimous decisions on his past fights. So when you see a guy like this with a lot of split and majority decisions on their past fights, it's often a pretty strong indicator that they've either got bad fight IQ, with self-destructive tendencies, they tend to make fights closer than they need to be, or you have a fighter who is very passive, very tentative, and doesn't do a particularly good job of putting their stamp on rounds. And when you watch Charriere's past fights, I think we've got a combination of the two. When you look at some of his matchups in the past, there are definitely long periods of inactivity where I feel he could have done a lot more to put a bigger stamp on rounds. But there are also a lot of examples of really bad fight IQ in his past fights, where he makes a lot of mistakes and pretty basic rookie mistakes that will get him into a lot of trouble if he continues to make those mistakes in the UFC. Now, it is worth noting that he's won his last 3, looked pretty good in his last 3. And the fights where he was kind of going to a split majority decision were back in sort of 2021, 2022. So he only would have been mid-20s back then, 25 years old, perhaps 26, and he could have improved a lot in that time. But typically speaking, if you have bad fight IQ, bad decision making, and you're a little bit passive at times, it's very, very difficult to change that. And when you look at Charriere, he's got, he's got exactly 30 pro fights. Quite experienced. He's a former Cage Warriors champion. It's not like he's a really inexperienced rookie making these sort of mistakes. Like he's an experienced fighter who should probably know better by now. Should probably know the importance of putting stamp on rounds and not giving up position on the ground and things like that. So there are a lot of red flags with Charriere, which is a shame because from a technical point of view, he's absolutely excellent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down how these two do match up from a technical point of view, and then I just want to show a little bit of footage on Charriere so that you can kind of see some of the issues that I have with him. So when we consider how these two match up from a striking point of view, Charriere is just a very technical striker. He moves well, he uses his length well, you know, he's just a very well trained, solid fighter to watch. I think he could develop to be very, very good. And when you look at Mariscal, he's more of a brawler. He's more scrappy. On the feet, he's not particularly technical. He can't match the technique of Charriere, but he is game, he is tough, and he does throw a high volume. So if this fight stays standing, there's no doubt that Charriere is the more skilled fighter, the more technical striker out of the two. But if he doesn't pull the trigger, I could see a situation where Mariscal could outwork him. But personally, I think Charriere will win this fight if it stays standing, because he is a far superior striker to Mariscal. Now, on the ground is where things get real interesting, because, again, from a technical point of view, Charriere's takedown defense and ground game looks really, really good. It's just that he's one of these guys that often makes rookie mistakes on the ground and gives up position a lot, which does get him into trouble. Mariscal is one of these guys who's just a blue-collar, gritty, industrious fighter who hustles really, really hard on the ground and just looks to out-hustle his opponents on the ground. You know, he doesn't have particularly good grappling control, doesn't have particularly good offensive wrestling, but he understands the importance of position over submission. I feel he's a more intelligent MMA grappler than Charriere, even if he doesn't have the athleticism or technical ability of Charriere. And the thing is, a lot of the time, you know, even if you're not as skilled as your opponent, if you're smarter from like a fight IQ point of view and understanding the importance of position, you know, guys can often get the edge over more technically skilled grapplers, and we could see that here because Mariscal doesn't give up position that much. He is smarter on the ground than Charriere, and I'll just show you some clips actually of Charriere's ground games. You can kind of see where I'm coming from. Let's pop this over here. Okay, so if we bring up Charriere, the fight that I want to show you is Charriere versus Daniel Bazant. Control F it. Here we go. Let's bring this up. Alright. So, all I'm going to focus on here is winning positions that Charriere gives up. Because when you look at his performance, it's really impressive. Like little sequences like this where he uses his striking to set up a really nice deep double leg takedown entry, which is very nice, and he gets it. You know, there's a bit of a scramble there, but he stays scrambly and wins it. And then again, shortly, gets right in on another deep double leg here. So you can see his offensive wrestling's really, really good. Gets the takedown, beautiful. And then he just, you know, rides Bazant from back control, chips away at him with ground and pound. Looks to have good grappling control, very strong MMA grappling. Everything's good. He's doing well. He's out hustling Bazant, showing clear dominance on the ground, but then starts to get overly aggressive on back takes. You know, instead of being patient and focusing on position, you can see that he falls in love with his back take and just ends up in a situation where he loses the position because he gets overly aggressive on the back take and ends up on the bottom here. Now, this is 50 seconds left to go in the round, which is obviously the business end of the round, right? Immediate impact outweighs cumulative effect, and we know that judges weigh the action at the end of the round very, very heavily. So it's important not to give up positions like this late in the round. But Charriere does. Now, when we... I don't want to make this breakdown video super long, so I'm not going to go into, you know, loads of depth on this. But when you go back and watch this fight, Charriere's MMA grappling, his grappling control, it all looks really, really good. When he's the aggressor, his grappling control looks excellent. He's got, you know, a real physically imposing edge to his grappling control. He's very technical with it as well. But that doesn't translate into defensive wrestling, because we can see in this position when he's on his back, he just looks very, very weak off his back. You know, it's 50 seconds left to go in the round. Charriere's winning this round. If Charriere showed some urgency here to get to his knees and pop back up to his feet, there would be no ambiguity as to how this round would be scored. Charriere would definitely win this round, but instead he spends the last 50 seconds of this round lying on his back doing nothing, which then gives the judges an opportunity to take the round away from him and score it for Bazant. So we'll just flick through so the breakdown's not super long. You can see there he looked very weak off his back. Now as we go into round 2, similar sort of story really. Charriere outstrikes Bazant on the feet, outworks him in grappling positions, takes him down. It's all good, everything's good. Charriere is looking great. And then towards the end of the round, almost around about the same time in the round, minute and 20 seconds left to go, for whatever reason he starts to try working for a guillotine. I don't understand why he needs to do this. It's a minute and 20 left to go in the round. He's got great cardio. Just focus on position here. Just focus on staying heavy and tight from top position, putting this round in the bank, getting it over the line. Instead, he just, for whatever reason, wants to go for this mounted guillotine, loses position, ends up on the bottom once again at the business end of the round. Again, minute and 10 left to go in the round. And this is where you want to see him show urgency to work through this position, get back up to his feet. He's outstruck Bazant in this round. He's outgrappled Bazant in this round. But he can't afford to end this round in this position, or again it gives the judges an opportunity to take the round from him. So he gets to his knees here, but he just hesitates in this position. He just doesn't show urgency to get back up to his feet or scramble over to the cage. And ultimately he just ends up rolling back onto his back and then getting back to his knees. And again, I don't want to make this breakdown super long, but he just basically fucks around on the ground, fishes for this this Kimura, and just doesn't really make much of an effort to get back up to his feet. And so again, he's in a situation where he's won the first 3.5, 4 minutes of this round, but then made a silly mistake going for a mounted guillotine that he didn't need to go for because he's already winning the round, loses position, and then puts himself in a situation where he might actually have lost that round. And then if we go into round 3, similar sort of story really. Charriere outstriking Bazant, outgrappling Bazant. I don't want to make the breakdown really long, so I'm not going to play the whole round. You know, takes Bazant down. You know, really good double leg entry here. Very, very nice. You can see his offensive wrestling is great. But then again, you can already guess what happens. Bazant hits a switch, gets Charriere down, and then the rest of the round, you can see Charriere this time doesn't give up position until later in the round. It's only 35 seconds left to go when he makes the mistake this time, instead of like a minute left to go like in the first and second round. But you can see it here, just again gets overly aggressive on a guillotine and just gives up position, basically pulls guard. 35 seconds left in the round. Bazant inevitably slips his head out and again ends the round in a dominant position. So for me, this just shows that Charriere's fight IQ isn't the best. He makes a lot of mistakes in fights, and you know, while to some extent he can probably get away with it against these lower level guys on the regional circuit, when he comes up against UFC caliber fighters, tough, well-rounded, gritty, determined guys like Mariscal, he won't get away with making these kind of mistakes, because guys like Mariscal will make him pay. So when we look at how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, Charriere is the better striker technically. He's got better offensive wrestling, better grappling control, better grappling from a technical point of view as well. But one of the most important attributes in a fighter is fight IQ, and I feel that is an area where Charriere is particularly weak, and I feel that's an area where Mariscal is particularly strong. So skill for skill, Charriere is better everywhere, but skills aren't always enough, and I do think Mariscal may be able to make Charriere pay on the ground for giving up position a lot. So that's how I see this fight. Now my lean on this fight is in the even money odds range, so my lean would be Charriere, just because he is better than Mariscal everywhere. There's also the likelihood that he has improved a bit since these fights back in 2022, 2021, where he made a lot of mistakes. But at the same time, old habits die hard, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if a crafty veteran like Mariscal were able to make a younger, more inexperienced fighter pay for mistakes he made in his debut. I know Charriere's got more fights than Mariscal, but I think there's a different maturity level between these two. Mariscal's definitely a lot more trustworthy. So I hope you found that breakdown useful. We can now take a look at the over-under on this one. I do think the fight is pretty likely to go deep. Both guys are tough. Both are pretty well-rounded. If you look at Charriere's record, his last few fights have ended inside the distance, but before that, he was a bit of a decisionator. And look at a lot of his fights going to a decision. He's one of those guys that doesn't seem to have much power in his hands, and he's not particularly dangerous on the ground either. If we look at Mariscal, we know he's tough. We know he's well-rounded. A lot more of his fights have ended inside the distance, but I think this is because he's been facing a relatively low level of opponent. I think he'll be one of these guys that as soon as he starts to face a step up in competition in the UFC, we'll see him go to a decision more frequently. That's what happened in the Trevor Peek fight, and obviously the Jack Jenkins fight was likely to go into that third round that ended up in for that very strange injury in the fight. So yeah, I do think this fight's reasonably likely to go deep. Unfortunately, the odds reflect that. It's pretty steep favourite odds on this fight to go to a decision. But yeah, man, it's one of those things where I don't feel too strongly either way on the over-under. Partly because I don't love the odds on the over. My lean would be over, but I think the odds suck, and therefore I would not bet that. In terms of the props, I think the most likely outcome is Charriere by decision. But a prop that is interesting to me that not all betting sites have is Charriere to win by split majority decision at 9.0 plus 800. I quite like that because, you know, MMA judges are absolutely terrible, even in fights that are very easy to score. Like, what fight did we have on the last card? It was the Chidi Njokuani versus Reese McKee fight, right? It looked to me like Njokuani won that fight pretty clear, at least 2 rounds to 1, yet the judges still had it a split decision. So even if Charriere wins this fight decisively and dominantly, the judges could still have it as a split decision. And knowing how frequently Charriere, is involved in split majority decisions, I just think this is a really, really, really good prop. And if your betting site has it, probably worth a bit of a sprinkle, because I don't see Charriere finishing Mariscal. Mariscal's a tough fucker. If Charriere does win, which I think he's more likely to, it's probably going to be by decision, and with how often he goes to a split majority and how bad MMA judges are, pretty good chance that hits again. So I really, really like that prop. I hope you found that useful. Alright, now let's break down the next fight between Christos Giagos and Ignacio Bahamondes. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Bahamondes is the favourite at average odds of around 1.29, which is going to be minus 345 for an implied probability of 78%. If we take a look at the odds on Giagos, he's around an average of 3.75, which is going to be plus 275 for an implied probability of 27%. So Giagos, 34 years old, 5'10", with a 71.5 inch reach, and Bahamondes, 26 years old, 6'3", with a 75.5 inch reach. So we can see that Bahamondes has a pretty substantial size and reach over Giagos. He's quite a bit taller, also has a 4-inch reach advantage, which is very nice because Bahamondes also uses his length and his reach very well, fights very long. He's a very, very good boxer. So this is a bit of a nightmare stylistic matchup for Giagos, because one thing that has held Giagos back in his UFC career and plagued him is his gas tank. He has very, very bad cardio. And the biggest problem with Giagos is pretty much the same problem that Alexander Hernandez has, in that his biggest strength is his grappling, and grappling would be an area where he would have an advantage over Bahamondes in this fight. The problem is, Giagos, like Hernandez, gasses very badly when he grapples. So even though from a technical point of view, Giagos is a very good grappler, very strong wrestler, very good MMA grappler, can't really use that skill for long, because if he does, he gasses very badly. So this is a nightmare stylistic matchup for Giagos, because on the feet it is going to be very difficult for him to match the pace the Bahamondes fights at. Bahamondes isn't the best defensively, but he does throw a very high volume of strikes. He's very aggressive, and he forces his opponents to constantly engage. So while Giagos definitely has the power to hurt Bahamondes, and perhaps he could knock him out early, if he doesn't get it done early, Bahamondes is going to outstrike him by a wide margin across the 3 rounds, because there's no way Giagos is going to be able to keep up with the volume of strikes that Bahamondes is going to throw at him. Now, we've already said that Giagos is a really good MMA grappler, and that does give him an edge on the ground over Bahamondes, but the thing is, Bahamondes isn't that easy to take down and hold down, and even if Giagos were to get Bahamondes down, if he couldn't finish Bahamondes early in the fight, he would likely gas himself out in the process of trying to take Bahamondes down early, which would then make Giagos's grappling ineffective in rounds 2 and 3, which would then leave him as a bit of a sitting duck on the feet for Bahamondes to kind of outwork and outstrike. So it's a very, very difficult stylistic matchup for Giagos. I think if he doesn't knock Bahamondes out or submit him early, he's going to lose this a high percentage of the time. So the odds are probably pretty much where they should be on this one. My lean is definitely Bahamondes. I would not be taking Giagos here. This is a very bad stylistic matchup for him. I would expect Bahamondes to win this relatively comfortably. Unfortunately, his advantages are baked into his odds with him being a pretty big favourite. Now, in terms of the over-under on this one, I wouldn't touch the over-under on this personally for a few reasons. The first being that Giagos does have big power and he's very aggressive. The thing about Alexander Hernandez is that Hernandez has kind of learned that he needs to pace himself and fight safer and smarter and spread his output out across 3 rounds, so that, you know, he's still giving himself a chance of having some energy left to perform relatively well in round 3. Giagos doesn't really pace himself in the same way. He doesn't make that adjustment. Giagos is still quite happy to be aggressive early and exert a lot of energy early, and so with how bad Bahamondes is defensively on the feet, I could see a situation where, you know, Bahamondes gets knocked out early. I could also see a situation where the first round is a war and Giagos gas is very bad in the first and then Bahamondes stops him early in the second. So for that reason, I'm not interested in betting on under 1.5 rounds. So I'm not interested in betting on over 1.5 rounds, because I could see 2 situations where the fight would end early. On the flip side, I'm not that interested in betting on the fight to go deep. Sorry, might have lost my train of thought. I'm not too interested in betting on the fight to end under 1.5 rounds, because both guys are very tough, very durable. Giagos is one of these guys that, because he does gas in every single fight, he's quite used to fighting tired, so he's not one of these guys that freaks out and completely falls apart when he gets tired. He's an absolute dog that will hang in there and continue to fight. He will continue, you know, trying to stay in there and stay alive and continue to fight. So for that reason, I could see the fight hitting over 1.5 rounds as well. So quite torn on the over-under. I don't have a strong opinion on it, so I won't be betting on it. In terms of the prop bets on this fight, we can see that there are some interesting ones. So I'm quite surprised that Giagos by knockout or TKO is in that 9.0 plus 800 range. Quite surprised by that. I know that Bahamondes has got a great chin and he's tough as nails, but he hasn't fought like big hitters either. Obviously Klein's got a lot of power, but Ogden, Rongzhu, Roberts, McDessie don't. And the thing is, we have seen him dinged and wobbled a few times. He took big damage against Klein. McDessie wobbled him. And Giagos does have pretty legit power. He does hit hard. Obviously brutally knocked out Rick Glenn. Glenn's got a good chin. I don't think I like Giagos to win by knockout or TKO enough to bet it, because Bahamondes is very tough. He's the kind of guy you have to practically kill in order to beat, or kill in order to finish. But I do think that I am surprised the odds are that wide. Are the odds declining on that? They are a bit, I guess. It's a downward trajectory. Yeah, I'm surprised. I thought Giagos by knockout or TKO would have been closer to, like, what are his money line odds? Oh, actually, no, it kind of makes sense with him being such a big underdog. Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. I wouldn't bet it. Not particularly likely to hit, but if Giagos does win, I think it is by knockout. And you've got to consider, right, Brzeski is a volume striker, not at all dangerous on the feet, and he almost finished Bahamondes. He had him wobbled, he had him hurt real bad. Giagos has legit power, so if someone like Brzeski can hurt Bahamondes on the feet, you bet your ass Giagos can as well. But you know me, I don't like props. It's not, props aren't my thing, man. Betting on football, UFC live betting, over unders, sniping, you know, pre-fight bets on fighters with major advantages over their opponent everywhere. Those are my thing. Those are the fights that I have huge edges on. Those are the bets I have huge edges on. I like to stick to those things. Props, they're just not my jam. They're for other people. That's all cool. We all have our own way of doing things. Okay, now let's break down the next fight, which is going to be Lucas Brzeski versus Walter Walker. Very, very, very interesting fight, this. So, what really surprised me about this fight was how bad Walter Walker was, considering how big of a favourite he is. And I want to kind of show you some footage of this guy to kind of highlight how bad he is, because I'd love to get your thoughts on Discord or in the comments on this fighter, because I am very, very tempted to bet Brzeski. And we're going to have a bit of a discussion about this matchup in this breakdown, because there's a lot to think about, right? So if we look at the odds on Walker, he's around about an average of 1.38, which is going to be minus 263 for an implied probability of 72%. If we take a look at the odds on Brzeski, he's around about an average of 3.15, which is going to be plus 215 for an implied probability of 32%. If we look at the odds movement on this fight, we can see that the odds are declining on Brzeski, which means a lot of people are thinking the same as me and thinking, you know what, it's kind of crazy how this Walker guy in his UFC debut is a big favourite, because he isn't very good, and we're going to show you some footage of that. So Brzeski's 31 years old, 6'4" with a 78-inch reach. Walker, 26 years old, 6'6" with an 81-inch reach. So straight away, a couple of X factors on this one. Walker, bit of a size and reach advantage over Brzeski, although to be fair, he doesn't look like he uses his reach particularly well. He's undefeated, and he's making his UFC debut, so we've got octagon jitters and all that sort of stuff to contend with. Now, what I would say about this fight is it's a very low-level heavyweight fight. You know, we get those heavyweight matchups in the UFC between two very low-level, very sloppy, you know, very awkward, not technical heavyweights. This is one of those fights. And that's why the odds are interesting to me, because from my perspective, both these guys are very bad. And so to have one of them as a big favourite just feels a bit wide to me. Like if I was setting the odds on this, I would have had the odds a little bit closer than they are. So if we consider how they match up from a stylistic point of view, and then I'll show you a little bit of footage. So the huge issue with Lucas Brzeski is that his cardio's terrible, right? He gasses out very, very quickly in fights and then becomes very sloppy. Having said that, he is a tough fucker, and he does have a few fights under his belt in the UFC now, so he's got that experience compared to Walker, who's making his debut. So Brzeski's one of these guys that gasses very, very bad, but is tough enough to hang in there. And because he gasses in every fight, similar to Christos Giagos, he doesn't freak out, he doesn't panic, he doesn't fall apart. He still tries to hang in there and be, you know, relatively competitive. Brzeski's one of these guys who has reasonably good takedown defense and reasonably good striking for the level of fighting we're talking about. So when I say Brzeski is a reasonably good striker and grappler, I'm not comparing him to Francis Ngannou and Cyril Gane. I'm talking about Brzeski's level of skill on like a low-level heavyweight level, right? His striking and takedown defense is decent for the level of fighting we're talking about. The problem with Brzeski is that when he gets tired pretty early in fights, it all goes out the window, and his takedown offense goes out the window, and he becomes easy to take down, and he becomes very sloppy on the feet, bad defensively. But the thing about Walker is he's also very sloppy. He's also very bad defensively, and his cardio is pretty bad as well. The reason why I think Walker's a big favourite in this fight is because he commits hard to his takedowns. Because he's a big guy, when he gets on top of you, it's hard to shake him off. And Brzeski's obviously got bad takedown defense when he gets tired. So because of that, Walker should be able to take Brzeski down and dominate him on the ground. But the thing is, when you watch Walker's past fights, he's facing really low-level fighters that don't really offer up much resistance at all. So when he's shooting takedowns, generally speaking, he's getting them easily. And his opponents aren't really, like, they're not skilled enough to work their way back up to their feet. They're not skilled enough to use the cage to defend takedowns, which would force Walker to burn through more energy to complete the takedown. And while I'm not saying Brzeski is capable of doing these things either, or Brzeski's got good defensive wrestling, all I'm saying is Brzeski will offer up a lot more resistance than a lot of Walker's past opponents. So what I'm going to do is bring up one of his recent fights. Well, actually his last fight against Alex Nicholson, who obviously used to fight in the UFC. And you can kind of see some of the issues with him. Right? So he's in the black shorts with the green. So you can just see he's a bit stiff, a bit slow on the feet, a bit sloppy, pretty low level. Just awkward, stiff, low level, right? You see how he reacts to that left hand? Doesn't react well to pressure. Just very sloppy, low level fighter on the feet. And then shoots a nice deep double leg and gets it. Nicholson's back up. But you can see on the feet, he's just wild, reckless, sloppy, not at all technical. And so Brzeski will have the advantage when it comes to striking, in my opinion. But, I mean, look how easily Nicholson gives up that takedown. So many of Walker's past opponents just give up such cheap takedowns, and they just don't make him work for them at all. But his striking defense is so bad, he's so sloppy, that I just think there are opportunities for Brzeski to cause him big problems. I mean, look at his striking here. He's just running forward, throwing these big wide hooks, wide open down the middle. Just so sloppy on the feet. Just look how easily Nicholson gives up that takedown, right? Walker, you know, just gets it so easily. He's not made the work for it at all. And so here, we're about 6 minutes into the fight, right? This is 4 minutes 12 seconds left in round 2. Just look at how tired Walker looks here. Look at his body language. Mouth open wide. Look how tired he is. Taking big deep breaths. He's tired. He's sloppy. Look how tired he is. Big deep breaths. Mouth open wide. And then he shoots a double leg, and Nicholson gives it up easily. So the point I'm trying to make is, there are a lot of issues in Walker's skill set, which is past opponents. Like, look at this. Look, leaning on the cage, trying to catch his breath, and we're only halfway through round 2. Point I'm trying to make is there's a lot of issues with Walker. Bad striking defense, sloppy, potentially bad cardio, but his past opponents haven't been able to make him pay for it because they've just given up cheap takedowns. And Brzeski might as well, to be fair. Little Brzeski hasn't got the best takedown defense, but he's going to be way more capable of making Walker pay for these weaknesses than the guys that Walker's been facing in recent years. You know, look at this fight, man. It's so low level. And we'll just skim through. We don't want to make the breakdown super duper duper long. But just look, Nicholson just falling over. And if we go into round 3, You can see Walker just very tired here. A bit of a sitting duck on the feet. Gassed bad. In a defensive shell. Mouth open wide. So, when I look at this guy, it's just one of those situations where seeing him as a big favourite in his UFC debut just feels a bit funky to me, that's all. Problem is, Brzeski's got really bad cardio and his takedown defense isn't the best, so he's a tough guy to trust. But man, there's a lot of holes in Walker's skill set which can be exploited. And if Brzeski shows up with some improved cardio, slightly better takedown defense than what he showed us against Carl Williams, I think Walker could be in a lot of trouble here, because that was Walker looking very tired when Nicholson couldn't really make him work to complete takedowns. Imagine how tired he might look if Brzeski can offer up a bit more resistance and make him work harder to get these takedowns. Could look a very different fight against Brzeski. So, in terms of what that means from a betting point of view, I probably don't need to tell you that this is definitely dog or pass. You'd have to be out of your mind to bet on Walker as a big favourite. But whether you want to put your money in harm's way betting on a low-level heavyweight like Brzeski, that's up to you. Personally, you know by now how I feel about fights like this. Our edge betting on football is absolutely massive. We're making significant money betting football. Our edge is also huge live betting on the UFC, and we do extremely well focusing on the style of pre-fight bets, which we know works well for us. Our record on over-unders is insanity, and when we're patient and we hit those money line bets on fighters who, you know, have big advantages over their opponent everywhere, we perform very well on them as well. We've obviously already got a bet for UFC 300 next week. When we stay in our lane and we focus on betting the stuff that we know we have a huge edge on, we do very well. Don't feel my edge is that big. Betting on low-level heavyweight fights, I don't really want to take my hard-earned money, risk it on a guy like Lucas Brzeski, but the odds definitely feel a bit wide here for me, and I'm looking forward to live betting this one. Hopefully we can snipe a winner on it in live betting. So in terms of the over-under, again, I don't really have a strong feeling on the over-under on this one, only because it's a low-level heavyweight fight, so you can never rule out the possibility of a finish at any time. But having said that, Brzeski is a tough fucker. We saw that in the Carl Williams fight, and in the Martin Buday fight, to be fair. And so if Walker does come out spamming takedowns, taking Brzeski down, laying on top of him, it's not going to be easy for him to get a finish. Walker doesn't seem that dangerous on the ground, and that would mean the fight would be quite likely to go over 1.5 rounds, which I think would be the most likely outcome. But with it being a low-level heavyweight fight, Walker's debut, both guys having bad cardio, I don't really have any interest in betting the over on this one. So I hope you found that useful. In terms of the prop bets on this one, I think most likely outcome is Walker by decision, but the odds are absolutely terrible, so I definitely wouldn't be betting that. The reason why I say Walker by decision is the most likely outcome is because I don't think he's that dangerous on the ground. But with how bad Brzeski's takedown defense looked in his fight against Carl Williams, I think Walker probably is capable of hitting takedowns on this guy, especially when he gets tired and kind of just grinding him out from top position, taking a boring decision. So that's most likely outcome, but the odds are not good. So probably better off passing on that one. So now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be Charlie Campbell versus Trevor Peek. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Charlie Campbell is the favourite at average odds of around 1.55, which is going to be minus 182 for an implied probability of 65%. If we take a look at the odds on Trevor Peek, he's around an average of 2.45, which is going to be plus 145 for an implied probability of 41%. So Campbell is 28 years old, 6 foot tall with a 72.5 inch reach. Peek, 29 years old, 5 foot 9 with a 70 inch reach. So both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same size. Bit of a difference in body type, to be fair. Charlie Campbell has got that longer, leaner, skinnier frame. Trevor Peek, much more muscular, much more compact. and so slightly different body types. But I don't think it's going to have a particularly huge impact on this fight. So, out of all the fighters on this main card, I haven't been that tempted to bet anyone, but I am very, very tempted to bet Trevor Peek this weekend, because both these guys love to go toe-to-toe, they love to go to war, and they don't like to take a backward step. If you look at the past fights from either of these guys, they basically love to brawl and play rock'em sock'em robots. They're both dangerous. They've both got decent power in their hands. They've both got that killer instinct. And they both don't mind putting themselves in a lot of danger to get a finish and get their opponents out of there. They both have a kill or be killed style. In that sense, they're pretty similar. Now, Charlie Campbell is the more technical striker out of the two. But for me, Trevor Peek is more battle-tested, more battle-hardened. And I think that's pretty significant in the context of this fight. And so what I'll do is talk about how these two match up when it comes to striking and grappling. And then talk about why the fact Trevor Peek being proven to be battle-hardened is a pretty big deal in a matchup like this. So in terms of how they match up stylistically, I don't expect there to be much grappling in this fight, simply because both these guys like to stand and bang. They like to go toe-to-toe. They like to go to war. You will occasionally see them shoot takedowns, but for the most part, they want to stand and strike. So, if there were to be grappling in this fight, it's difficult to gauge who would have the edge on the ground, because we haven't seen a whole lot of Charlie Campbell's grappling. He's only had 10 pro fights. The majority of them have been stand-up fights. But Trevor Peek's ground game, like we saw in the Cheppy Mariscal fight, is pretty low level. Like, his takedown offense isn't the best. You can see Charlie Campbell trains with Matt Serra, Ray Longo. You know, it's predominantly a grappling-based gym. He's from a predominantly grappling-based team. We can't be sure that Campbell would have the edge on the ground, but from the flashes of grappling I've seen of Campbell, he does look to be the better grappler than Peek. But it's a bit inconclusive because we just don't have the footage to prove it. I do expect this fight to be a stand-up fight, though, because like I say, both guys like to stand and bang. And in the event of it being a stand-up fight, Campbell is the more technical out of the two. He's more accurate, he's faster, he's got better boxing. But Trevor Peek is meaner, he's nastier, he hits harder, and probably has more of that raw knockout power. Now, I think this fight has got Fight of the Night written all over it, and I'm expecting both these guys to go toe-to-toe and go to war. In that kind of matchup, I lean heavily towards Trevor Peek, because for me, he's battle-tested and proven. I know he lost the decision against Cheppy Mariscal, but we've seen this guy go to war in every single one of his fights so far, and we know he's crazy durable, he's got a great chin, he's very dangerous, and he keeps pushing. He's the kind of guy that you have to practically kill in order to finish. Campbell, on the other hand, has been getting into the same kind of wars that Peek has, but hasn't been getting into these wars with the same level of guy that Peek's been facing, right? We haven't seen Campbell go toe-to-toe, get into a crazy war with a guy like Cheppy Mariscal, and be involved in a pretty competitive fight. For the most part, he's been starching really low-level fighters or going toe-to-toe and playing rock'em sock'em robots with these pretty low-level fighters. I have a feeling that when he tries to do that against someone like Trevor Peek, who's just as mean, just as nasty, but has also been through the fire and has proven he's got that chin, that durability to hang in there and stand and bang with dangerous UFC level fighters, I'm not sure Campbell is gonna be able to get the better of Peek in a war, because ultimately Trevor Peek's not a very technical fighter. He wants to brawl, he wants to stand and bang, he wants to play rock'em sock'em robots. Trevor Peek thrives in a war. So when you face someone like Peek, you should try and take the approach of Cheppy Mariscal and take the fight into other areas where Peek isn't going to be able to use his durability, his chin, his toughness, his ability to thrive in a war to cause you problems. In Mariscal's case, it was taking him to the ground, right? you don't want to engage Peak in the exact kind of fight where he thrives. Problem is, I feel like Campbell also likes to go to war, also likes to brawl, and therefore will engage Peak in the exact kind of fight where he thrives. For that reason, I do lean Peak in this one. Again, like I will say, it's going to be very risky if you bet this fight, because both guys are going to go toe-to-toe. They're both going to go to war. They're both going to try and kill one another. But in a cage fight to the death, Peak's the kind of guy I'd like to have my money on, because I know there's no quitting him and he's tough as nails. So I'm very, 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 very much considering betting Trevor Peak this week. I haven't made my mind up on it yet. I'm going to go and research this fight a second time. This is definitely dog or pass. There's no way I would be betting on a guy like Charlie Campbell in his UFC debut against a tough, gritty, determined guy like Trevor Peak. It's dog or pass. Haven't made my mind up if I'm betting Peak yet, but I'm very, 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 very tempted. And we can see Peak's odds have started to decline in the last couple of days. So I'm going to go research this fight later tonight, and then I'll let you know in Discord if I decide to pull the trigger. I'm not sure if I will. Let me know what you think in the comments below on YouTube. Let me know what you think on Discord. Should I bet Peak? Are you betting Peak? Are you betting Campbell? What do you think? Let me know. So in terms of the over-under on this one, I'd be very, very surprised if this fight went to a decision. Like I say, both guys like to go to war, and I think this has got Fight Night written all over it. I think one of these guys will get knocked out, and the odds reflect that, with it being steep favourite odds on this fight not to go to a decision. So I wouldn't bet the over in a matchup like this, because I think anyone could die at any second. This has got war written all over it. In terms of the props, I think most likely outcome is Peak to win by knockout or TKO. The odds aren't great, so not the biggest fan of that. If you're one of these people that wants to sprinkle a little bit on a prop to make watching the fight more interesting, maybe go for Peak by decision. Odds at 10.0 plus 900. It's not that likely to win, but you know, it doesn't need to be that likely to win, you know, in order to make a profit long term on bets like this, with how good the payoff is if it hits. My logic for betting Peak by decision would be if this turns out to be like a knockdown, drag out war, but both guys kind of adrenaline dump and tire themselves out early to the extent that they don't have the energy to get the finish in rounds 2 and 3. You could see like a sloppy war of attrition where both guys are tough, they both refuse to quit, and it ends up going the distance with neither guy really having the energy to get the other one out of there. I don't think that's particularly likely, because Peak does appear to carry big power deep into the fight, and Campbell's cardios look pretty good in his past matchups. But you know, if you really, really want a prop, I guess that isn't bad. It's not for me, but I do think the odds are pretty juicy on that one. But outside of that, I wouldn't bother. I think most likely outcome, probably Peak by knockout or TKO, but the odds are absolute trash. Alright, so I hope you found that useful. If you did, thank you very much for watching. Please hit the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe if you haven't already. Nice one, guys. Sorry about the rant at the beginning of the video, but I just get pissed off, man. I put so much time and effort into these videos, and for people to just discredit me by saying mad shit, it's just really, I think it's just really dirty, and it's just not nice, and I just don't think people should do it. I think they're bang out of order, so I just want to speak out on it from time to time, because I think that I deserve just a bit more respect, that's all. So anyway, thank you very much for watching, guys. Take care, love you all, and I'll see you in next week's video for UFC 300. It's going to be a good one. I'm going to try and squeeze in some live streams as well. So nice one, guys. Thank you very much. Take care. See you all very soon.